Good evening from Miami, Florida. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel, and as you can see, we are getting one of those outer tropical squalls from Hurricane Irma. As of 8 o'clock, the winds down to 120 miles an hour, still a Category 3, expected to re-strengthen, moving west-northwest at 7, away from the coast of Cuba. And just imagine how bad it's going to be later tonight and tomorrow when you have a squall like this, and we're about a couple hundred miles away from the center. I mean, and look at the wave action out here. This is a nasty squall. These gusts have got to be 50 to 60 miles an hour. And these are sustained tropical storm force winds. Just listen to the wind and the roar. I want to have Chris shoot down there, shoot down that way a little bit. You can see the wind blowing through the lights and the palm trees. Just take it all in, because this is just the beginning of what we're going to be seeing for the next 24 hours and beyond in Florida. And look at the waves and the rain. Hang on there, Chris. I got you, buddy. The wave action out here in the cut. We're expecting a 4 to 6 foot storm surge. Come on back on me. We'll get the camera back to safety. We don't want to lose the camera with this rain and wind, but these cells are rolling right in off the Atlantic, producing marine warnings. We've had tornado warnings. We've had probably some touchdowns. We've seen some damage in Broward County. And we're on the northern extent of this huge gyre. And as we go into tonight and tomorrow, the wind field will expand. And although we won't get the worst of the wind on this side of the state, the west coast is going to get battered, because the track takes it right up the west coast, and at some point will go inland. So the storm surge is an issue up and down both coasts. We've got hurricane warnings for the entire coastline of Florida. Outside of the Panhandle, that would be the areas west of Apalachicola. And then you consider how hard this rain is. This is a couple of inches an hour, and it will add up quickly. So we have the risk of localized inland and flash flooding. And the tornado threat. There's a tornado watch now until midnight for southern Florida. That includes Fort Myers, Naples, and over here in the Fort Lauderdale and Miami Beach area in Miami. So we have that threat too. And again, the biggest threat that will affect the most people will be the destructive winds. Already, just checking Florida Power and Light, about 50,000 customers without power in Miami-Dade and 27,000 customers without power in Fort Lauderdale. Those numbers are only going to go up. And don't think because your power lines are underground, you're not going to get by without power outages, because if you have underground flooding, that can knock out the power. Well, Brian, I think we've gotten through the worst of this right now, but it's still blowing pretty good, buddy. You've been through some of these, and we're going to see a lot of this, and even worse, as we go through tonight and tomorrow. We'll get it back to you in the studio in the lab. You give us an update with that 8 o'clock from the National Hurricane Center, and also touch base on the radar, because I have no access to the latest tornado warnings. I know we have one in Dade right now that goes until 8:15, part of Miami-Dade County.
Yeah, you're right, Mike. That band is an extremely intense band, and we see this sometime.
This is meteorologist Mike Seidel in downtown Miami in the Brickell section, and we are dealing with some of the early squalls, and the one we had about 20 minutes ago was pretty fierce. Your winds gusting up over 50 miles an hour. I had to hang onto a pole. But another offshoot of all this rain is the street flooding here downtown Miami. We've had a couple of inches of rain today. Some areas could see a foot or more of rainfall, because as we get closer to the hurricane, it's just going to be rainfall at rates of 1 to 2 inches. It's going to be nonstop. You know, we've gotten a break in the rain right now. The winds are gusting about 25 to 30 miles an hour. You can see the vegetation behind me blowing in the wind. In fact, we talked to a gentleman, John Comer, who lives in this high-rise up here, and he said about 30% of the residents have stayed behind, and the only reason there's that many behind is because of the change in the track. Had it come right at us, the eye and the eye wall and the worst of the winds, more folks would have left. But they're feeling pretty confident, because this condo behind me, this building, is up to codes after Andrew with the more durable windows. And that's why a lot of people have left these condos and these hotels, or these condos. In fact, we have some in our hotel here in downtown Miami that live across the street, but they came over to the hotel because they were afraid of the winds blowing out the windows. And these winds are going to be howling tonight and tomorrow. Hurricane force wind gusts, no doubt. We've already had gusts to 70 in Fort Lauderdale. We've had at least a half a dozen tornado warnings in Miami-Dade and Broward counties, and some damage via social video on social media. The other issue is the surge coming in at us with that wind piling the water up, not only here in Maria La Rosa, but all the way up to Savannah and Charleston, and then on the west coast, they're going to take it pretty tough with that wind coming in, especially after the storm goes by, and the Keys too.
Absolutely.
I think I've kind of given away your act. Take it away, Maria.
No, you bring up an excellent point. It's far-reaching. And
tomorrow morning, weather turned dramatically different today in southeast Florida. Meteorologist Mike Seidel is there in Miami. Mike, with these outer squalls that are now coming through, I mean, it is rocking and rolling at times.
Yes, another one coming in here to Miami-Dade County. We're in downtown Miami in the Brickell section, and get a sense of the wind and the street flooding. Now, part of the reason is they're working on the storm drains, I was told by a local. So don't think it's as bad as it is, but again, it's going to get worse with this rain. This wind is coming right off the Atlantic across Miami Beach and Port Miami and right in here into Brickell. And you can see the vegetation, and this is going to be the issue. Wind speeds 70, 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, taking trees down over power lines. Florida Power & Light has already said this is going to be a multi-week process, but they've got, last check, I saw 16,000 crews from in-state and out-of-state, and they've staged them in about 20 areas across Florida. So they're all ready to go, but they cannot get the bucket trucks up until the winds drop down below 35 miles an hour. And again, they've got to wait for the water recede. Now, our surge issue is going to be tonight until mid-afternoon tomorrow, and then once the storm goes by, the wind's going to go offshore from the southwest. That'll blow the water back out into Biscayne Bay and back out into the Atlantic. So after we get about past mid-afternoon, we are going to be done with the surge, but not done with the wind and the tornado threat. We're under a tornado watch right now until midnight. They'll extend that for sure. The Storm Prediction Center, we've already had video of tornadoes, waterspouts, and some damage up in Broward County. So Mike Bettis, it's going to be one of those nights. You can hear the wind whistling out here, and it's just going to continue to do that all night and only get worse for you, for here in South Florida, and for the areas on the other side where you are, Naples and Fort Myers. And I'm trying to get a cue here. Where do we go now? Okay, let's
Mike
go back
Seidel.
to Norcross.
Mike Seidel, can you hear me?
Give us an update on the radar and what's going on as far as the current tornado warnings in South Florida.
So what I was going to say...
Thanks, Brian. Meteorologist Mike Seidel here in Miami. 9 o'clock on the East Coast, and we're all watching Irma now, slowly pulling away from the Cuban coastline. Still a very dangerous hurricane. It has weakened some. The mountains in Cuba helped out during the day today. Now winds are sustained at 120 miles an hour, moving west-northwest at 7. Forecast to become a Category 4 hurricane sometime on Sunday, and then eventually make landfall on the west coast. So the only saving grace here in this side of the coast is we're not going to get the most destructive portion of Irma. With that said, we've already had wind gusts to 70 miles an hour, a couple hundred miles away from the center, so that just gives you an idea of how destructive these winds are going to be overnight and Sunday here and across the entire state of Florida as Irma makes its move up the west coast. Here in South Florida, we've had several rain bands. We've had reports of tornadoes, waterspouts, and even some damage. So it's been a tough evening so far. Mike Bettis is over on the west coast where they were really going to get hit tomorrow, and it is going to be probably catastrophic, Mike, for you and your friends over there and up and down the west coast. And we want to get updated with you right now on your status there, what you've seen so far. And you did mention earlier it's basically a ghost town, which is exactly the way it should be in a situation like this. Back in Miami tonight, I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel, and a reminder that if you lose power, we've got you covered from now until Monday morning. We're streaming the Weather Channel live on the Weather Channel mobile app. I know millions of you have that, and also the Local Now app. So if you're without power or if you're away from your TV, you can keep up with what's going on because Irma has many hours ahead of us and ahead of it, because it's going to take until Tuesday before it finally winds down somewhere in the southeastern part of the United States. Meanwhile, here in Miami, we're getting a break, at least here in the Brickell section of Miami-Dade County. Just some light rain now. Winds are still gusting about 30, 35 miles an hour. But we've had, I've lost count now, 4 vicious squalls rolled through here in the past 3-4 hours, and each one of them produces a lot of rain, and they have produced severe weather. Up in Broward County, we've had waterspouts, possible tornadoes, and there is a tornado watch for all South and Southwest Florida until midnight. And Brian Norcross, it's a given that'll be extended, and we'll probably have a continuous tornado watch situation into the first of the week, all the way up into parts of Georgia, South Carolina, and even Alabama. But first things first, we're awaiting the next advisory from the National Hurricane Center, the updated forecast track in a couple of hours around 11 Eastern. What can you tell us now about the movement away from Cuba? Because all day it seemed like it just didn't want to jog north. It just wanted to keep steaming west along those keys there on the north side of Cuba.
Yeah, we're going to look at that, Mike. It does seem like it's moved farther away from Cuba. Whether this is another jog or whether this is the move